All right, it's early spring. I mean, really early spring. It's just starting to get around the corner here, just turning the corner from winter. What I mean by that is when the water temperatures just breach that 50-degree mark, right? Get up in that upper 40s, right around 50 degrees. We're talking early spring. That's an inflection point where the bass start to get more active. That's because the bait fish and the forage start to get more active too. So your tactics change a little bit. All this winter you've been dragging baits and fishing really slow and fishing deep. Now you change it up a little bit. Here what we're doing is we're trying a couple of different baits, a couple of different tactics. We're gonna start with the Alabama rig. Yeah, Alabama rig. You know, it's a real producer during the wintertime, and it still produces here in the early spring. The key difference here is, first of all, you're fishing in steep rocky banks, steep rocky areas, and the deeper points that are right on the edge of going into a spawning flat, maybe even a secondary point. But those are the areas that you want to target with the Alabama rig. And here you're just slow rolling it, just cranking it real slow along the bottom. So in order to do that, you can't use real heavy weights because you have to crank faster. So use no more than 1/8 jig heads on your Alabama rig. Use those 3-inch, 3.5-inch minnows on them, and you can slowly roll it right along those rocky areas where those bass are staging, getting ready to move up shallow. As the spring progresses and you get into the mid-50s, you can now transition a little bit more to the gravel bank areas that aren't as steep, more of a slope, and get a little bit further back to those docks and such. As those fish move up shallower, you can follow them with that Alabama rig. So definitely use an Alabama rig this time of year. The next bait that I like to use, and of course across the country is very, very popular right now, which is a suspending jerkbait. Suspending jerkbaits are killer this time of year. This is arguably the best time to be throwing a suspending jerkbait. So what we do with those, again, you want to target those rocky banks, also those deep weed lines, brush piles, those rock piles, things like that are still deep. I'm talking, 5 to 20 foot deep in those entrances going into those coves. You work that jerkbait up to that, let's say a brush pile, work it up to that brush pile and then let it sit, let it suspend. Just let it hang out. Wait a while and give it a little nudge, just a little twitch with the rod tip, and let it sit again. And if there's any bass sitting on that brush pile, you got their attention, and those little twitches, those little nudges, that's usually all it takes for them to come up and just and take it. And usually the bite isn't super vicious, so you got to be a line watcher and pay close attention. Typically when you go to move it again, you're going to feel that weight or you'll see your line swimming off. So pay attention for that, and it can be a great way to catch a bunch of fish right now this time of year. This is fantastic. Just use shad colors, perch colors, bluegill colors, and you'll be fine. The next bait that I like to use a lot is crankbaits. Yeah, now that seems like, oh, we're fishing really fast, like in the fall and in the summertime we're fishing it. No. You're still not fishing it fast, but you're fishing a little bit different. First of all, I like to target riprap areas and rocky banks. The primary reason is the water is warming up, and as it starts to warm up, those crawdads get more active. And so I like to use a crawdad pattern crankbait. And the fish will start feeding on those crawdads. And one way to tell is if you're using those jerkbaits and the bite starts to wane. You're catching a bunch 1 week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks in a row, and pretty soon you're not catching as many as you were. Well, they're shifting their diet now to those crawdads that are getting more active. That's when that crankbait pattern crawdad comes into play. So riprap banks, steep rocky banks, rocky points, secondary rocky points, and then as the water warms up, look for those sloping gravel banks that are leading back into those spawning coves. Docks, particularly the ones that are on pilings, but the ones that are the floating docks too, if they're under deeper water, those are the areas to target between that 48 to 55 degree range. The next bait that I like to use a lot is a spinnerbait. If you all been watching my videos, you know I love spinnerbaits. I probably caught more fish on spinnerbaits than any other bait, including the jig. But it is a fantastic bait for me, and I've used it throughout the year. So there's no difference this time of year. I've got one tied on. And the one that I like to use the most this time of year is a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait with double Indiana blades. I like to use the gold blades right now because the water's a little bit dingier, a little bit stained. It's still low light. Typically you got all fronts coming through or cloudy conditions, so those gold blades work best. They've got still a good amount of thumping blades on them. And what I do is I slow roll that, just like the Alabama rig. Same areas, slow rolling it, but I include weed lines and brush piles and flooded brush, flooded timber, because a spinnerbait is quite weedless. And so you can fish it in those areas and not worry about getting hung up. Just slow rolling along, especially when you're still just a little bit below 50 degrees or 51, 52. Those steep banks or ledges, throw it out and let it flutter straight down, just helicopter it. It'll fall horizontally like that. You know, a horizontal position, falls vertically. The blade's helicoptering. If you don't quite get that action, you can use a single Colorado blade, and that works really well. But I like the double Indiana blades because it just puts off a little more flash and vibration. But a single Colorado blade can get that thump, 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 and that can really work well too. White is all you need. That's kind of that shad baitfish color, works great. I like to use a trailer on them. And no trailer hook, just a trailer. If you're getting follows or you're getting nips and they're just nipping at and they're not taking the bait, that's usually a color issue. So I might go to a white and chartreuse skirt, or maybe change the gold blades to a silver, and that typically gets them to commit. The last bait that's super effective, works all year round, I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but that's the jig. The jig is like the #1 producer for most guys. It's my second most popular bait for me. I use it all around throughout the whole year, and so again, this time of year, no different. The best way to use it, I like to, again, those steep banks, those transition banks in that 10 to 20 foot water, again in that 48, 47 degree up to about 52 degrees. If you can find an edge where it's got some flooded brush or timber and then it drops off to 10, 12 feet, maybe 7 feet, that, the bass will get up right inside there and they'll hang out right on the edges. And you can flip that even though you're in a little bit shallower water, say 4 feet, but it's right next to that big drop. They'll hang out right on that edge. Typically I'm using a 3/8 to a 1/2 ounce jig, primarily the browns and green pumpkins. I'm using a trail that's got some action to it, like a rage craw, to slow down the fall. And if I'm in real dingy water, then I'll use a black or black and blue, maybe a black and chartreuse color. That's like a staple around the country. Really good. You can't go wrong with those colors at all. The thing about it is, in the spring, you're getting some fluctuating water levels, you're getting some fronts come through. So with all these baits, one of the things to keep in mind is that the water level is going to position these bass. When you've got a lot of rain and a lot of water coming up, when the water's rising, it's going to push those bass a little bit shallower than they normally would be. So they might be in the backs of the docks. They might be a little bit higher up near the tops of those flooded bushes or the tops of the flooded timber, maybe on the inside weed line. But if the water level is dropping or it's low, then they're going to come out to the outside edge of those weed lines. They're going to come out the outside edge of those docks. They might be at the bottom of the bush and the timber, like I mentioned. They're on a ridge or a little hump and it drops straight down. They'll be at the base of those bushes. That's the kind of thing that you want to pay attention to when you're out there fishing these baits. And if you do, you're going to catch a lot of fish and have a lot of fun. Hope that helps. For more tips and tricks like this, visit bassresource.com.